Hey guys, so if you guys tuned into our live stream, it was kind of a fail, but we tried. Yay us! So Quinn's internet is really terrible, and we were hoping it would work, but it didn't work. And then the video cut off like 45 minutes of what we had, so you guys never got to hear the exclusive scene that I promised. I'm so sorry. So I'm gonna play it for you. There's gonna be a picture instead of my face. Because it's an audio recording. But yes, please enjoy this exclusive, never heard, never seen before scene except by me and Olivia and Lauren, who were here at the live stream because we got to hear it, but you guys didn't, which really sucked. But here it is. Enjoy.
Hey guys, this is take 4. I keep messing up, so anyways, I'm going to be reading Soren and Elle's bonding ceremony to you. Or not their ceremony, I should take that back. It's the scene where we've gotten past the ceremony and this is them in the private, behind closed doors. You guys know it's not going to get naughty, so just, sorry about that. But that nobody has seen this or heard this. Brittany hasn't even heard it or read it, I don't believe. So you guys will get to see her reaction. Also, I just want to throw a disclaimer out there. You guys know I'm an author. I'm not a narrator. I can't do awesome things with my voice. There will be no deep, low, sensual Romanian accents going on over here. There will be no high, flighty, sweet, girly voices over here. I don't do British or not British or Irish or not Irish or any other ish that there is out there. I don't do. I just do Quinn. So, that sounded weird. Anyways. Okay. I'm going to wipe the smile off my face and we're going to jump right in. She was nervous. Thousands of years old, and yet she stood, staring at herself in the mirror, afraid to go out and face her mate. In her defense, Elle had never intended to take a mate. The Fae weren't nearly as giving in their affection as the wolves tended to be. But the great Luna had other plans. So, now here she was, mated to a Canis lupus. Her hands shook as she attempted to untangle her long pink hair. Her fingers paused. What if Soren didn't like her hair being pink? Would he ask her to change it? Would she change it? What if he didn't like it being so long? Maybe he would prefer it being shorter like Krina's. Perhaps he wouldn't like her body. She was small, much smaller than most of the female wolves she knew. Elle pulled the short silk robe tighter around her body as she considered that she might not be visually appealing to Soren. That thought made her heart beat painfully hard in her chest. Her eyes met the ones staring back at her in the mirror, and the panic she saw was unsettling. Elle didn't panic. She couldn't panic, not with Perry as her leader. But Perry wasn't there to tell her to pull herself together and get on with it. That's definitely what she would say. Then she would say that Elle was stalling by having an imaginary conversation with herself. And she would be right. Ugh, Elle groaned as she placed her hands on the counter and lowered her head, tucking her chin in close to her chest. Her loose strands of hair fell around her face like a pink, cascading waterfall, providing her some shelter from the harsh lighting that seemed to point out all of her flaws. She took several deep breaths, attempting to gather her emotions and shove them back in the box that they had spilled out of when Soren had spoken and touched her so tenderly. He had changed her. Already in the short span of this new relationship, Soren had irrevocably altered everything she thought she knew about herself. Elle didn't hear him enter. She was so lost in her own thoughts that she jumped when firm hands wrapped around her waist. She didn't look up right away. If there was even the tiniest bit of disappointment in his eyes, she didn't think she'd be able to handle it. So Elle simply stood there, head bowed, shoulders shaking from the intense emotions rolling through her and heart pounding in her chest as though it was trying to break free and make a run for it. She could feel his eyes roaming over her as though it were his hands skimming ever so lightly across her skin. He was everywhere, and yet she knew he still stood behind her with his hands on her waist. "Open the bond, my love." His deep voice was thick with emotion. Elle had closed the bond tight as she took a shower. Though not necessary for her kind, the warm water should have relaxed her. It didn't. Gradually, she released the tight hold and allowed him back in. His emotions flowed in gently, but fervently. He was desperate to be a part of her. His wolf was frantic at the separation, especially because they could sense her distress through the door without the mental bond. Soren's wolf had wanted to rip the door from the hinges, but the man didn't want to scare her. So he'd walked in calmly, reached for her, and then gently commanded her to do what he knew would bring her comfort. And it did. His emotions filled her. It left no room for doubt. Elle could literally feel what he was feeling. The fear that he didn't like her hair was immediately dismissed as she felt his intrigue and delight because of it. Elle's self-consciousness of her body began to fade as Soren's desire for her flowed through the bond. He thought she was beautiful. He also wanted her clothes off. At that thought, she finally raised her head and met his eyes in the mirror. They danced with humor. But beyond that, they were filled with longing for her. "Will you let me love you now?" Soren asked as he pulled her up straight and turned her to face him. Elle took the offered hand and let him pull her into the bedroom. To her surprise, the room was dark. There was no soft lamp lighting or flicker of candle flames. "I thought you could provide the mood lighting for this evening." Soren's warm voice flowed through her mind like rich melted caramel. "I think I can handle that," she teased as more tension eased out of her body. Elle raised a hand and muttered the words of her people, and then a round ball of light appeared. It hovered where she left it after dropping her hand and providing enough light that they could see. Elle's eyes widened as she took in her mate. In the bathroom, she hadn't bothered to look at anything other than his face. His eyes had been the anchor she needed to keep her from drifting off in the rapids of self-doubt. But now she was looking. And wow. That was the extent of her vocabulary as her eyes traveled from his bare feet, which were sexy. How can that possibly be a thing? Sexy feet. She didn't know, but there it was. Elle's eyes roamed leisurely up his calves and thighs that were encased in black slacks, then up his torso, which was all too visible, courtesy of the unbuttoned gray shirt. She didn't allow herself to dwell on the perfect abdomen. There would be time for that later. By the time her eyes reached his face, there was a smug smile lifting his lips. Kissable lips, she might add. "Will I do?" he asked her, not embarrassed in the least by her drooling. Elle held up her hand and pinched her forefinger and her thumb together. "Little bit," she said, unable to keep the stupid grin from appearing. "All's fair, my love. You had your look, now I get mine," Soren said as he stepped closer to her. His hands went to the knot holding the robe close, but they didn't move. Soren looked into her eyes and waited. Elle knew what he was waiting for. She turned her head, tilted it back slightly, and bared her neck to him. Soren's wolf growled approvingly as they watched their lovely mate submit to them. The smooth skin of her neck that connected to her shoulder called to his inner beast. He darted forward and nipped the flesh, though not enough to leave a mark. Elle's breathing increased, and he could smell her desire as the scent of raspberries thickened the air. His hands deftly untied the knot at her waist and slowly pushed the robe apart. He chuckled at the nightie she wore. "Jen's idea?" he asked as he ran his fingers across the words embroidered there. "Surprise! I'm not naked. Yet!" the shirt taunted. The robe slipped off her shoulders and down to the floor, exposing more skin. Soren wouldn't deny that he wanted to remove all of the offending fabric so that every inch of her flesh was his to explore. But he had other things to attend to first. "Are you going to bite me?" she asked. "I mean, for real, not the sexy nipping thing." He grinned at her. "Yes, love, I'm definitely going to bite you." Soren sat on the edge of the bed and pulled her down into his lap. He pushed the long tresses away so that the creamy flesh was laid bare before him. She shivered. "Are you cold?" Soren asked. Elle looked at him from the corner of her eye. "Your lips are practically touching my skin, and your warm breath is doing things to me. And you ask if I'm cold because I shivered." "My warm breath is doing things?" She shook her head at him with a sigh. "No longer worried about me being cold, are you?" "Not when you tell me that my warm breath is doing things to you." He pulled her tighter against him and nuzzled her neck. Soren's wolf was done with talking. He wanted action. He wanted to claim, mate, and then bed down in their den with his body wrapped around hers, sheltering her from the world. He growled, and he knew his eyes would be glowing with the wolf now at the forefront. He licked her neck once, twice, and then sank his fangs into her tender flesh. Her emotions hit him like a torrential downpour with Category 5 winds. Soren wrapped his arms more tightly around her, afraid that in his surprise he might drop her. Never had he imagined that the blood rights would be like this. Everything bare. There was no hiding anything from each other. Every ounce of her needs poured into him. She assaulted his senses, soothed his wolf, and gave the man hope as the darkness receded further. Soren heard her moan and then gently pulled his mouth away. He licked the wound and pressed a kiss to it. His wolf nearly forced a howl from him as he stared at the bite, his bite, marking her for all to see as his female, his true mate. "My turn?" she asked breathlessly. Soren pressed his lips to hers, lingering only a few seconds before turning his head so that his neck was made available. He felt her small fingers flitter across the skin as she pushed the shirt from his shoulder. Elle shifted her body, repositioning herself so that biting him wouldn't be awkward. With her knees in his lap and her hands braced on his shoulder, Elle leaned in and wrapped her mouth around his skin. He felt the scrape of her teeth and then the quick pain of the bite, immediately replaced by the desire that accompanied the blood rights. Once again their emotions clashed together, wrapping themselves so tightly around them that it was unclear where he ended and she began. They were one, true mates as it should be. As soon as Elle released his neck, Soren pushed the wolf aside and let the man take over. Lips met flesh, over and over. Hands touched, unclothed, touched some more, and learned each other's every dip and curve. Soren left no part of her wanting. Elle left every part of her heart in his care. Together they gave and took and gave some more, their passion flaring over and over long into the night. For over a century he had been waiting for her. He'd watched others find their mates, and he'd fought the darkness, hoping that tomorrow would be the day that she would appear. And now, here she was, his Elle, strong and feisty, but also very gentle and kind. Soren would never take her for granted. He would never forget how empty his life had been before her. "I love you," Elle whispered in his ear as his body enveloped hers. His grasp on her tightened, and he pressed a gentle kiss to her neck before whispering back, "And I love you." His lips grazed the sensitive flesh of her ear, and she shuddered. This time, he didn't ask if she was cold. Okay, so I know there were some slight mistakes in there occasionally. Ignore those, please, because if I tried to get it with no mistakes, I would be on take 55 or something like that. So anyways, I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I hope I read it slow enough. I really tried to think about the speed of my words because I tend to talk fast. So there it is. There might be a future one of Adam and Karina's night together that we might get to see. I don't know. Could be, could not be. Anyways, you guys have fun with the live stream, and I will talk to y'all. Well, not really talk to you later. I'll see you online.